a moment there. Okay, just need to give one more minute. We're just waiting for some people to come onto the YouTube stream.
Okay.
Sorry about the delay there. Just need to give one more minute. We're just waiting for some people to come onto the YouTube stream.
Okay.
Sorry about the delay there. So for those that are already in the Zoom room, if you have colleagues that couldn't access the Zoom link, or you'd prefer to watch on YouTube, the YouTube link is now in the chat, which you can find the button for that at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to spread that around to anyone who may want it. That's also being emailed out to you now as we speak. I can see there's people already popping onto there, which is very good. So we will be underway any minute now. Right, let's get underway. So, as always, a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you everyone for joining us with our latest AutoTalk Professional Development session. Just the housekeeping first. As if you're in here early, you may have heard I have had a little bit of a computer issue today. So if you find my eyes are distracted a little bit in the wrong direction, I do apologize for that. I've got a camera on one computer and the screen on another, so it's a little bit all over the place. So as we said before, you can access the stream through Zoom that you're already on, or you're through the YouTube link. Feel free to share that around. This will also be available afterwards on the Auto Media Group YouTube channel. So if you want to share it with your team or with your staff afterwards, then please do that. We will send out the link afterwards, as well as any other information that comes from this and contact details for the people involved. So that's that. Now, if you want to ask any questions or you have any observations during the event, there are a couple of ways you can do it. If you're on Zoom, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat button or a Q&A button. You can ask questions through the Q&A button or through either of them. I'll pick up either. We're pretty good at doing that. If you're on the YouTube channel, there's the chat function on the YouTube page. If you are not able to do either of those, then please do send an email to me at richard@automediagroup.co.nz, and we'll keep an eye on that as well and take those questions. But don't hesitate to jump in and interact with us at any time. That's one of the great things about Zoom and this kind of discussion. So getting underway, our speaker for today is a really experienced and well-known within business circles leadership expert. Would that be a fair way to describe you, Bruce? Bruce Ross of Ignite Business Leadership. Is that how does someone describe someone who teaches business leadership?
Well, first off, I'm a student of leadership, so it's a constantly evolving, constantly improving environment. That's maybe even one of the elements of leadership, is that you're always on the leading edge. You're always in the discomfort zone. And boy, do we have discomfort at the moment. But that's actually where learning happens, because we have this thing called a comfort zone, which we know, we're sure, and we're comfortable in. And then on the edge of that is the discomfort zone, and then a bit beyond that is the panic zone. But the learning happens in the discomfort zone. And if you look at just what's been going on with COVID and so on, and you reflect back, there's probably been an immense amount of learning because we've all been pushed out to the extremities outside our comfort zone. We've had to obviously adjust. So how would I describe what it is that I do? How to raise performance, how to improve performance, or how to sustain. I'm really interested in peak performance, and that may sound odd given that we're in uncertain times, but peak performance is an optimum state of consciousness where we perform and feel at our best. So some people know it as flow, and it's even possible to get into flow in these extraordinary times. But I'm interested in how to get the best out of ourselves and our people, put it that way.
Look, just you have contact with a lot of business people out there through the work that you're doing. I mean, this is not necessarily applicable to what we're seeing at the moment. What kind of management, what kind of leadership challenges are people coming back to you with at the moment? Are people seeking assistance on? Have you a little bit of a summary of what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a one-word insight for leadership, for management, and for these times. I asked myself a question a few years ago, in one word, what lies at the heart of leadership? And it's exactly the same thing as lies at the heart of great teams, great work teams, but also great teams like the All Blacks, great countries, great companies. And that is energy. So it's not vision, it's not execution, it's not presence, it's energy, because energy is the infrastructure beneath all of those things. And why do I say energy? Well, it's at one level, it's easy. You think, okay, if I've got high energy, I'm more productive. If I've got low energy, I'm less productive if I've got a headache. But what most people miss is that when your energy level is high, your thinking grows, your thinking broadens, you become a sense of spaciousness, you can think more clearly, decisions come more easily. If you make the wrong decision, you can bounce back, called resilience, more quickly. You are more generous, more authentic, more confident. You're in the best of yourself. High energy, higher intelligence, plus it feels good, well-being. Low energy, your thinking craters. And so there we're more brittle, we're more withdrawn, we're more blamey, we're more fragile, we are easily distracted. And so what we've found, but in the world at the moment, is because of the COVID thing, energy level has dropped. And there are all sorts of consequences of that. It's harder to focus. Productivity drops. People's attention spans are shorter. They need more sleep. They can't synthesize or metabolize what you've just said. So you need to speak in shorter sentences, one point at a time, because there's so much that is leaking our energy. And that's, even such things as, I know we're past it, we're nearly level 1, but having to wash or sanitize your vegetables, who would have thought? But there's a leakage there. Plus there's a worry about the future. So we're leaking all over the place. So getting back, I know it's sort of a circuitous route I'm taking. You see, what are the issues? The issues to do with uncertainty is, how do I get productivity up? How do I remain focused myself? How do I motivate my team? How do I keep them on board? Because I really want to keep the good people on board, not just just going through the motions. I want to keep them engaged. So if we use this consideration of energy, it's a very useful one. So one second point I'd like to make about the energy thing before we can start to, how do we apply this practically, is what level of energy does leadership sit at? Not leaders that you know, but leadership itself. And most people would say, oh, somewhere around the 9 or 10, isn't it? The answer is 8 and above. And why do I say that? Well, the job of a leader is to give energy. And in these times, it's to be the still place in everyone else's changing world. But essentially, it's to give energy. Think of it a bit like a child's job is to suck their parents' energy. The job of a staff member is to suck their boss's energy. That's just the natural flow of things. And they do that by asking questions, by wanting their time. And, the boss can get pissed off with that because they're always bloody asking questions. But what's actually going on is they want your energy, and you've got to be able to give it until, of course, you grow them so they become self-sufficient. So therefore, this whole area of energy is crucially important. If your energy is low, you can't think very well, and all you can do is go, oh, God, and come up with the same thing you've always thought. So the question about what level does energy sit at is actually an important one. Leadership is to do with change, and clearly we need to pivot, we need to change, so we need high energy levels, and it's 8 and above. So think of it this way, that if I come from an 8, you pick it up as a 7, I'm giving you energy. If I come from a 7, you pick it up as a 6, I'm not really shifting you. If I come from a 6, you pick it up as a 5, I'm sucking your energy, you don't want to be around me. So the job of a leader then is, well, how do I maintain or grow my energy? And at the same time, how do I help my team grow their energy? So the question of energy is actually a good one in the workplace. It's a very safe one, because you can have a meeting with your team and simply say, guys, we've just finished the meeting, usual meeting, whatever it is. What energy rating would you give that meeting? And now they probably won't put their hand up and say, oh, no, piece of paper, note paper, on a piece of paper, just write down what rating out of 10 would you give the energy in this meeting we've just had. Throw it in anonymously into the middle of the table and you pull it out. Now, typically most meetings are around the 4 or 5 mark. What does that mean? It means that people are walking out at a, I don't know, let's say 6, maybe 7. They're walking out with a low energy, and that's the energy they have to put into their work and out to their clients. So this whole area of energy is huge, not just for an individual level, for personal well-being, but also how do we keep energy level high with our team members? Because that's actually what gets out to each other. It's called morale, but also out to your clients. And at a bottom line level, your job is to raise the energy of your clients. So Richard, you're doing this exercise today. Why? You want to add value. Bottom line, you want to raise their energy level. Oh, I like Richard. He makes me feel better. That's at an energy level. So that would be a place to start. It's a very good and useful, simple consideration around energy, the health of a business, the health of a person, the health of a team, and our ability to think clearly is, where is the energy level at? And it needs to really be, we're looking at these times, it's the same as previously, more now than ever, is higher energy levels, 7 and above, but leadership sits, if it's 7 and below, it's what's called management level, which is status quo. Tweak the status quo, but it's not actually a shift or a change.
So we're talking about here, I mean, literally how you walk onto the floor each day with a smile on your face and have that go. I mean, is it simple as that? Is it simple as presentation and push? Or I mean, is there more depth to it? I mean, I imagine it's pretty hard these days if you're a business leader who's having to face some serious financial issues behind the scenes.
Totally.
And you've got to front your team. I mean, is part of that, I guess, swallowing that a little bit and putting on that happy face and perhaps a better attitude?
Yeah. So I think old school leadership is previously, hey, I've got to be all singing, all dancing, I've got to know all the answers, and I've got to be on 100% of the time. The good thing about COVID is that it's totally unprecedented. It's happening across the world at the same time. No one has ever been here before. And so now's the opportunity to have authenticity or vulnerability. And vulnerability says, guys, I don't know all the answers. I have a few clues. I'm out there researching. I'm talking to a lot of people, but right now I'm in the dark. I've probably only got 40% of what I need. That's what's called vulnerability. It's not oversharing. It's speaking the truth. So you don't have to pretend, because this whole thing of fake it till you make it is a load of BS. The reason is that if you are faking it, you're using up valuable energy. It's expending it on your presentation, and it's on the outer edge of yourself, and people pick up the mixed message anyway. So when you come from a place of what I call authenticity or vulnerability, and you can say, look, this is the situation, or you can say transparency. This is the situation. You don't have to be anything other than who you are. The other good thing about vulnerability is that it makes you accessible. So what turns up, you may say, well, I've got this weakness and I'm struggling with this, but I will get through. Turns up to you as vulnerability, but it turns up to your staff as bravery. wow, he's speaking about that, makes you more accessible. And also it's the first thing that builds deep trust. Gee, I can connect with this guy. He's not superhuman. He's having struggles like I am. Maybe I can talk to him. I feel I can talk to him. And one of the core platforms at the moment, well, in fact, anywhere really for a team, is what they call psychological safety or trust. That I can feel safe to be myself around my boss, or I can feel safe to put forward a silly idea and it won't get jumped on and rubbished. I can feel safe to voice my opinion. I can feel safe in this environment. So it's allowing other people to also be authentic. Now, the great thing about this COVID time is that our typical roles have been stripped back and everyone's feeling raw. And so consequently, the level of conversation can go deeper. What do I mean? Well, there's been a research that 2,000 leaders, and they evaluated top 20% across the whole spectrum of terrible leaders to really good, but across 2,000. And they gave them the same scenario. And the scenario was, you've got a staff member who's always late. They don't get to work at 9 o'clock. They're always late. And they typically ring at 5 to or 5 past to come up with some stupid excuse as to why they're late. They've just rung up again. It's 9:05. You know who it is. You picked up the phone. What's the first thing you say to them? Now, of those 2,000, the top 20% all said exactly the same thing, which was, are you okay? Is everything okay? Even though they knew that this was the idiot who was always going to, just coming up with these stupid excuses, and he's not really a long-term employee. The point here is connecting with the person first before you talk about their competence or their technical ability or whatever it is. So the human piece is absolutely essential in these times. Hey, how are you going? Oh, good, mate, good. No. How are you going? How are you going? How's your family? What's things like for you? And so you're touching on the human side of things.
It all sounds quite the balance. I mean, you've got to, and I may be oversimplifying this, but you need to maintain energy and a positive attitude to the staff, but at the same time, you've got to genuinely bring them in to understand what the challenges that you're facing are, and treat them, and also take an interest in what their challenges are, I guess, at the same time. Is that kind of a good summary there? I guess it's not that difficult to do. That's a fairly good core of things to move by, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing too, which is even a great thing for these times, is what's called collaboration, because you as a leader don't know everything. They independently don't know everything, but together you can have a conversation which creates greater clarity. Because the thing to move away from, they're all feeling uncertain. Do I keep my job? What's the market happening? What's the government doing? When do we get freedom? And a whole range, there's uncertainty. Okay, how do we bring certainty into an uncertain environment? And one of the ways is what you can do with your team, and I'd highly advise this, is you can do scenario planning. So you do worst, best, and likely case scenarios. So let's talk through, guys, and your whole team, even the guys who don't say much, even you might consider factory workers, to be included sort of changes the dynamics, because, oh, you're interested in me, or including me? These are more management type considerations. No, I want your input. So what's the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and then the likely? So now they're going, oh, I hadn't really thought about it before, but now I've heard from Fred and Mary and Mabel and whoever, and I'm starting to get a better picture. So it's bigger than my view, and okay, so we're preparing for the likely case. Yes, so now they have a sense of certainty. Now, the other thing is that, especially right now, as a leader, you want to be finding out who are the good guys, who are the ones who are commercially astute, are actually thinking on behalf of the company. And so you can give each of your staff, I'd actually recommend sitting down with each of your staff, and there's a series of 9 questions. I'll go through them fast, but I can make them available for people afterwards because they're so useful. These are the sorts of questions that I'd recommend get asked, here we go. What are the top 3 things we should be true to and not change, and why? What are the top 5 things we should change and why? What do you most hope I do? What are you most concerned I might do? What advice do you have for me? What do you expect from management? What should management expect of you? What are the top 5 things that could get you fired? And what are the top 5 things that would guarantee your retention? So I can make that list available if people want to email me. But you sit down with your staff members and you start to open them up. Number one, there's a sense of, this guy really is interested in me. But number 2, as the leader's perspective, you're really interested in their answers to find out who are the people who are thinking and thinking on behalf of the company. And these are the people I really want to keep going forward. So this is called collaboration. This is called building certainty. You've got to work from what's solid, work with what you've got, work with what you can control, and then work out from that point. But certainly collaboration at the moment, to get, individually we don't know, but together we do.
No, fantastic. And I guess that ties into the earlier one. I mean, and I know in our business, we brought all our team in on a fairly early basis on what was happening. And we looked to them for solutions as well, and ideas and concepts of how to move forward. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to go back to our topic list here, just because this one sounds very interesting, and I know if anyone listens to Joe Rogan, they talk about this kind of stuff a lot.
Right.
But how can brain science help identify the main levers to pull to lift performance levels? And look, in the automotive industry, that's going to largely be focused on the sales team on the floor. But can you tell us about that a little more?
Yeah, so brain science, without getting into it too heavily, what you've got over the eons of time, the brain has developed 3 layers. At a most base level, it's what they call a lizard brain, and that's the alive or dead. So that's the thing that keeps you going even though you're asleep. Saliva in the mouth, blood pressure, need to go to the toilet, whatever. The next layer is what's called the mammalian system, and this is to do with the fight, flight, freeze, protection part of the brain. Think about that part as like a watchdog. It's your personal watchdog. It's on the alert the whole time for anything that's not consistent, that's a bit odd. At an extreme level, it's an earthquake. At a minor level, it's, oh no, I just didn't feel right. I mean, I don't know, there's something about it. So that's the watchdog, or that's that part of the brain is watching for what's not consistent, what's wrong with this pattern. And certainly we've had a lot of what's wrong with this pattern recently. Those 2 are hardwired into the system, and they take no effort to run. They just happen automatically. Okay. Then you've got the 3rd layer, which is the neocortex, which is what they call executive function. And these are the things that make us distinctly human. So the ability, behavior modification, the ability to consider consequence, planning, high human emotions like patience or care or consideration, compassion, those sorts of things. Everything that you want from yourself as a leader and you want from your team comes from the prefrontal cortex and the neocortex, comes from the higher level. It's to do with the insight. What changes do we need to make? How do I change my behavior to become more in line with the company? What are some new innovations? Creativity comes from that part of the brain. Think about that part of the brain, it takes effort. Give an example. If I said to you, tell me some of the problems you're having in your life at the moment, you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you'd list them just like that. No problem. And so that's coming from the mammalian part, the watchdog part, because a problem is a threat. You store it because you need to focus on it. Effortless. If I said, yeah, but what's going really well for you in your life at the moment? No, what's going really well? You'd probably go, oh, okay, well, there's this and that and this and that. But there's a delay. It takes effort. You've really got to put your mind to it. You're working from the other part of the brain, the higher, the rational part. So here's the thing. What you want is for people to access the higher thinking, come up with the insights, come up with the new initiatives and so on. But to get there, it's got to get past the watchdog. And the watchdog is on the alert, and it works 400 times faster than this other brain. So what happens is a slight change in what's going on, like COVID, or massive change in what's going on. The watchdog's got your attention, and it to be up and yapping at you, it sucks blood down out of the higher thinking to send cortisol and adrenaline and get your attention, and rendering you unable to think. So this is why when we've been triggered, we can't think. At the extreme level, it's shock. So if you've got someone, there's a car accident, someone lying on the side of the road, and there's a paramedic holding 3 fingers up, and you're going, what's he doing? You're saying to the person on the ground, you know, how many fingers am I holding up? What's the color of my trousers? What do you have for breakfast? You think, what? The reason is because the injured person is in such shock, the blood is drained away from their higher thinking into the mammalian brain, and he's trying to get the blood supply back up by asking questions. So this is the neuroscience that when we are triggered, whenever there is a threat, whenever we have been judged, in the extreme cases, this is the racism in America, they feel judged, and so they go, rawr, and so they're now into their lower thinking as opposed to higher thinking. They can't think, they can't access all those things that they need to think long term, to consider the different ramifications, the subtleties, what are all the checks and measures. So neuroscience and that whole triggering of what happens when we are overwhelmed, which is what's happened when our skills don't match the challenge that we have and go, oh, we've been triggered, that's a threat. And it reduces our ability to think. Bad news, a flame email, the look from your partner, someone not turning up to work again, trigger. And that straight away, I pick it up in myself as a gnawing in the stomach. That's how I know I've been triggered. It's go, ooh, that's the adrenaline pumping through the system. And I know it's going to take me at least 15 minutes before I can get my head straight to be able to think clearly. So that's a little bit of the neuroscience. Hopefully it wasn't too technical, but that's a real thing. And so people who binge watch television, they are re-triggering themselves, you know, for these negative articles and press clips and so forth. I mean, you're from the media world, so you understand if it bleeds, it leads. If if there's an opportunity to capture their attention, put it out there. Now that can have a negative effect, and so the job of a leader is to, how do you direct your attention into something that's going to cause a settlement? We want that part to be settled. So I don't know, is there anything inside that you want to ask more about? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I get how that that kind of mammalian brain, you know, you send someone a nasty email, well, they're going to be thinking about that for the rest of the day rather than actually going out there and performing. How do you flip that switch the other way and use that thinking to lift performance levels? Is it simply avoiding those challenges, or is there other stuff you can do to push it the other direction?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. So there's a number of things. Number one, I think it's important to have a certain compassion that we are more raw, we're more fragile now than usual. And so therefore, what does that mean? It means that throughout the day, I need to have active recovery that really settles down the mammalian brain. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, at a very basic level, it's going, like you hear of, okay, just breathe, right? Okay, that's a very basic level. And the reason for that is when you breathe in, it ignites the sympathetic nervous system, which is the take action. When you breathe out, it agitates the parasympathetic, which is relax. So at a very basic level, breath work, you breathe in and whatever it is, over 2-3 seconds, you breathe out for double. That's a relaxing process. What that does do is sends a relaxant through the body, and it quietens down that brain. You can begin to think. Okay, that's one level. That's called breath work, and there's a whole level of sophistication around that, which I can go into if you want to, but it's a bit technical. Another one is simply going for a walk out in the sunshine. The reason for that is that you're moving out of your head and into your body, because the stress, the overwhelm that we feel is mental. It's the thoughts that we're having. As soon as we put our attention into our body, that is, we move our whole body, it quietens down. And that's the key thing inside us. We want to quieten down that inner critic, that inner noise. So things like exercise, they say 20 minutes. Yes, 20 minutes to get the blood pumping, but it's actually 20 minutes. It takes 20 minutes to quieten the noise in your head down. So that's another thing you can do. Sleep, massive, huge thing, is better than supplements. So it's the greatest thing you do to help settle the system. But on a more practical level, day to day, we need to go more micro. What do I mean? Well, because we have so much on our mind, or so much more on our mind, all these things are leaking energy, we can't focus as much. And before, we'd have a to-do list. So I write down my to-do list and write down the things, probably 10, 15 items. And I would try and get through that. That was pre-COVID. Now I would recommend having 2 lists. Have your action list, but also have your cognitive load list. What the hell is a cognitive load list? The brain works best when it's empty. It's a terrible filing cabinet. And so what you want to do is to get everything out of your head, everything you need to think about, put it on the cognitive load list. And when it comes to your to-do list, don't have the standard need to write a letter, email there, put together that proposal there, put together this presentation there. Break it down to smaller elements. So presentation, what's the title? So you put down presentation title, opening phrase, key concepts, who I need to speak to about it, slides, or whatever it is. So you're doing micro steps. The reason for that is every time you complete something you crossed off, you have a little squirt of dopamine, a little squirt of energy, and you feel good. Whereas before, you could handle just do the presentation. There's a lot that actually goes into the presentation, but now the brain can't handle it as much. So that's at the level of day to day, but even planning, short-term planning. Okay, let's plan for the week. Let's plan for the month. This planning 3 and 6 months out, hard to get your brain around, too much cognitive load. We want certainty. So let's plan for this week. Let's plan for next week. Let's plan for the 2 to 3 weeks, and then maybe a month, because we don't know, there's so many changes going on. So this is one of the elements that's going on at the moment, because we're leaking so much energy. We need to, number one, active recovery, going for the walks, breathing, breath work. There are a range of other things actually as well. Looking at active recovery, there's a thing called our primary flow activity. What do I mean by that? It's the thing that we love the most, we get lost in. A hobby, mountain biking, surfing, embroidery, coloring in, whatever your thing, music, music. Do more of that, because that's one of the most healing activities and rejuvenating activities. So before it's, well, maybe when I get around to it, now it's an absolute essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, how do you apply and just very briefly, I mean, it's slightly off the topic, but it sounds to me like a bit of an ad there for looking at alternative things when working with your staff, things like alternative work structures, offering in workspace exercise, editing breaks to make them perhaps longer. I mean, is there any of that kind of stuff that people can do to, in the stressful time, help their staff in that area as well? I mean,
yeah, totally.
It's hard to force staff people to go for a walk in their own personal time, but if I'll start, what's your take on, say, a 4-day work week?
Wow. Yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm all for it. They've actually done research around this, that you've got to still complete what you had before, but do it in four days. And one of the biggest triggers is in flow. There are what's called flow triggers. One of the biggest is a thing called autonomy, which is I give you permission to complete it anyhow you want to do it, but you've got to complete it. It's still only 4 days, but you've got to complete it. So now I have a sense of mastery. I have a sense of control over my world, which is, wow, I know my timings. I'm best in the morning, or I'm best in the evening, whatever, and I'll get a lot done then. But I have this greater sense of autonomy. And that, I know that runs contrary to typical work between 9 and 5 or 8 and 7:30 or whatever it is. I get that. But the whole area of autonomy is, okay, so this is the outcome we want. You get to it however you want to get to it. And I'm here to support you. So autonomy is important. At a very basic level, if you want to help someone with autonomy and you want to structure, there's not a lot of stuff that they can make a choice of. So we'll choose between one of these two things. The fact they're making their own decision gives them a squirt of energy, squirt of dopamine, but it's still autonomy. Now, one of the interesting things, because you talked about, well, how do you actually integrate this into the day-to-day life? Google has a full-time mindfulness coach, and every meeting right throughout the whole company, the first 5 minutes is in breathing, is in mindfulness. You think, isn't that a waste of time? Don't they? Shouldn't we get into business? But what they've found is that breathing settles them down, gets them more into the executive function, helps them think more clearly. So yes, what you could do is, maybe it's a bit too woo-woo, hey, we don't do that in our meeting. But what you could do is anything that raises the energy. So it could be simply three deep breaths, guys. Or turn to the person beside you and tell them what's the best thing that's happened this week. Anything that raises the energy. Because if you have higher energy, the thinking is better, they're more able to get with what you're talking about. They'll have more productive meetings, they'll walk out on a higher level. There's a greater chance they'll then be able to communicate that out to the rest of the team and your clients. So here's another thing. Ask your team what needs to happen. Here's a good general question. What's important for me to know about in the area of? So let's say we're talking around performance, productivity. So I'm saying to you, Richard, what's important for me to know about from your side in the area of productivity? Very general and open question, and it gives you the power. But now I'm learning about what enables you to be at your best. And you may go, well, I work best over here and over here and over here, like this. Oh, let's see if we can modify that somehow. The key thing is, how do I get you guys thinking and thinking for yourself and coming up with suggestions, as opposed to me saying, this is how we're going to do it, and you complaining.
Why now? I mean, why is the best time to engage your staff in this kind of way of thinking? What's so special about us coming out of COVID that now's the time to really put the stuff in place?
Because our habits have been broken. So we're raw. We're actually in a state of grief. And what grief is, that something which was precious to you has now been shaken or taken. We're in a state of change, state of dislocation. And so we're going, whoa, hang on, my usual routines have been broken. And it's forced us to think. It's actually forced us into, either we retreat or we go, well, how do we get through this? How do we get through this? And we look for ways to get through it. And so everyone is going to be looking for better ways, or the new way. And so that's what you're looking to capture. It's very difficult to say we need to change our business model when everything's going smoothly. So if it is, as you're a business owner and you're going, wow, if I'm honest, my business wasn't actually going as well as I'd hoped, as well as I'd wanted pre-COVID, there is the opportunity for a change, an opportunity for potentially a new business model. I could look at it in terms of, if we started from scratch today, what would that look like? And you ask that of your staff. Now, you're actually in a state where you've actually got to think like that anyway. It's not just some hypothetical idea, some sort of management talk thing. So because our habits have been broken, we are open to change. In fact, we've got to change. And also not just for now, but in preparation, we need a certain resilience going forward. So it's not just a change once and, all done and dusted. It's how do we sustain, how do we maintain, how do we keep each other buoyant, because we really don't know how things are going to pan out. It looks like New Zealand's going to do okay, but what about the rest of the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why now, and those questions are so useful, and even getting your team members involved in strategic planning. What are we going to do next, guys? Okay, what are we going to do after that? What are we going to do after that?
I'd almost argue, going back to the start, if there's almost more of a one-word insight. You've got energy there, but it maybe change should be the second word on that insight list at this point in this unique kind of business environment that we're facing at the moment.
Well, in terms of one-worders, I think there's another clue inside this, and that is you get your team together and say, if there's one thing, one word that's going to see us through, what is it? And you go, well, what do you mean? And so it could be resilience, it could be boldness, it could be belief, it could be innovation, it could be, and so you get everyone focused on the one word. I obviously agree what the one word is that's going to get us through. So I'll see if I'll give you an idea, an analogy. When all of this kicked off, the very, way back in late March, early April, I woke up in the morning, one of those mornings, and the first thing I felt was a deep anxiety. And then right, this is the world I'm in. And I felt totally dislocated. And I was going, why? And because there's so much uncertainty. And I thought, I can't handle that uncertainty. I need to be able to chunk it down into something that I can handle. So I said, so what's the metaphor of what we're going through at the moment? And the metaphor I came up with was that there were some people in the 1800s were forced off their land. They were given half an hour to grab the suitcase, fill a suitcase with whatever they had to get on that sailing ship. They're going to the other side of the world. They didn't know what the other side of the world looked like. They'd never been on a sailing ship before, and they only had half an hour to get their suitcase together. Get on. If you want to survive, you get on that boat. And so we're on the boat. The boat's left harbour. We don't know how long the trip is. We don't know what the other side looks like. So I was thinking, that makes sense. So here I am, I'm on the boat. We're all on the boat. Now, to get to the other side, that's pioneering, right? Okay, there were some people who came to New Zealand, they were pioneers, and they needed certain spirit. They needed a pioneering spirit. So I thought to myself, I don't really have the answers. I need to put a mastermind around me of a group of people who I think have got a pioneering spirit, because I'll need that on the journey over in preparation and also on the other side. So the word for me was pioneer. How do I hold a pioneer spirit? But if you can have one word in your team that you agree on, and then go, well, how do we focus in on that? So that's another one word, and I guess solution, focus point, point of agreement, interim plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. It's quite. I'm sitting here, and it's. And I'm not sure about the others sitting there, but I'm mulling through what we've done within our own business during COVID-19 and wondering how that fits and how we can use it to adapt. If there's any questions from the panel, from those watching, now's the time to ask. But perhaps if you could just run through what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, and what kind of things do you offer businesses that do get in touch? How do you generally work with a business or with a leader if they come to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most important thing is the leader feeling good and clear in themselves. So they may feel uncertain or unclear. We need to get them performing the best themselves. So that's at the one level, it's one-to-one coaching, but also working with teams to get them up and going and firing. So that's the new vision creation, the new purpose creation. That's working at that level. I also specialize in the area of mindset and how to get and stay in a clear, powerful mindset, which is that how do you stay in the higher levels, the prefrontal cortex, neocortex, and how to get the best out of your people. And I'm actually holding a webinar on the 11th at 4 o'clock on sustaining peak mental performance. So that'll be a freebie. It's a deep dive into the whole area of mindset, keeping it very practical, very simple, 1, 2, or 3 word answers. And so people are welcome to email me on bruce@ignitebusiness, one word, ignitebusiness.co.nz, bruce@ignitebusiness.co.nz. So that's for the webinar that's coming up. And working with organizations or individuals. It could be specific around the mindset, or it could be around how do we get the best out of our teams during these times. The other thing too is that I have put together a mojo measure, which is that energy chart. So what are the predictable behaviors that go with the different levels of energy, which could be really useful because as a self-reflection tool or as a tool that you use in terms of leadership. Hey guys, what's our energy rating? So no wonder our performance is low, it's at 6. How do we get it up to an 8? That's another opportunity if people want me to email that out to them as well, bruce@ignitebusiness.co.nz. Fantastic.
Look, thank you very much for speaking with us today. No questions. We must have covered off the key stuff that came through. So just for everyone there, thanks again for watching. The YouTube link we sent it earlier will remain live permanently. We'll send it out a couple of times with the AutoTalk emails through the next week. And again, we encourage people to spread it out and follow that later. This one, I suspect, will be one that's watched a lot later, because I think it may need a little more to absorb than some of the more technical ones we've done. But thank you so much for joining us today, Bruce, and we'll hopefully you'll hear from a few of the people out there in the automotive trade.
Brilliant. I've enjoyed it. I appreciate that. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
No worries. Thank you so much.